For all verified facts, subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hello and welcome. The number of COVID-19 cases in India have crossed 315,000 now. That's the highest number for any country in the world for any wave, obviously. More specifically, some countries, notably the United Kingdom, have now banned visitors from India because they are likely carrying or transmitting the B1617 variant, and is now called the Indian variant, of which about 103 cases have apparently been discovered in the United Kingdom. So the UK Health Secretary Matt Hancock said on April 20th that they were concerned about the characteristics of this variant, such as greater transmissibility or resistance to treatment or vaccines. The United States has also renewed its travel advisory, which also obviously warns against travel. Now, the question that we would want answers to is as follows. One, is there something more fundamentally dangerous in this mutation, which we know is bad, but how bad that countries are now beginning to impose travel bans, particularly on India? Secondly, when there is a statement like characteristics such as resistance to treatment or vaccines, does that mean that there is something that we do not know about these mutations, and therefore we should be at least asking the questions, if not finding the answers? So to answer these questions, I now have with me Dr. Jeremy Kamil, Associate Professor of Microbiology and Immunology. He's essentially a virologist at the Louisiana State University Health Sciences Center at Shreveport. Dr. Kamil, thank you very much for joining me once again. And what is your response and understanding of this particular mutation and the manner in which countries like the United Kingdom have now banned travel?
Well, first, let me thank you, Govind, for having me on the show. It's an honor and a privilege. To address your question about the travel ban, as much as these mutations are interesting and they may have some phenotypic effects on the virus, I'm kind of shocked by these travel bans, and I think they're discriminatory against countries like India. You have I can't imagine any reason why the UK, which is where B117 originated, which is a very concerning variant, why weren't they banning travel from England to India to protect India from their scary variant? It puzzles me that every time we find a new variant, and we're going to find new variants, and some of them are going to be of somewhat increased transmissibility and maybe a tiny bit of ability to resist vaccines, but all of these variants are going to be controlled by the current vaccine. So it's important to understand that this B1617 variant, it does have some mutations on it that have been found in other variants, and so I don't see something spectacularly concerning about it in and of itself. I think that the big wave of infection seen in India is most likely due to human behavior. This is because people are mixing indoors without masks, and India is a very crowded country with a large population. So when you have a lot of people in a small space who aren't wearing masks or following advisories, you're going to see spikes in cases. I do not believe that this spike in cases is solely or exclusively driven by the phenotypic differences with this virus. So I really do disagree with those travel bans. I think there's concerning variants all over the world. It's important that people wear masks on airplanes and get tested before they travel. But this is not a new pandemic. This is the same pandemic we were in since December 2019 when the virus emerged in China. I'm very troubled to see these travel bans because I think they're discriminatory.
Right. Now, the B1617 variant that we are talking about now, and those 2 points once again, so transmissibility and the treatment on vaccines. So you're saying that there is no fundamental distinction in transmissibility, except of course what is evident, which is that it is more infectious. But and otherwise, it retains all the characteristics of the SARS-CoV-2 virus that first came upon us last year.
Well, I have to stress that we don't have laboratory data yet on this variant as far as increased transmissibility or resistance from vaccines. So we have to take data from other variants that have some of these mutations and infer what we'd expect to see. But by the number of mutations in the spike, there's about 5 mutations that or substitutions on the spike that are different from the parental virus it came from, which is basically a G614 spike, which is now the dominant spike. And this is a fewer number of mutations relative to B117 when it emerged. It had 8 mutations in the spike. So it's not a particularly frightful variant from the spike configuration, I would say. It is concerning, and I would classify it as an eligible to be called a variant of concern, but you need to get laboratory data. As far as some of the mutations, we would expect the E484Q mutation to possibly resist neutralizing antibodies, just like we know E484K does. And that mutation is found in the P1 and B1351 variants that are variants of concern. But again, vaccines control the most terrible consequences of any of those variants, which are hospitalization and death. If you get a good vaccine, which most of the vaccines are, you will be protected from the worst consequences. So what's really important is that people do not lose sight of the fact that these variants are not super viruses. They do not escape vaccines altogether. They're probably more of a threat to reinfecting someone who's already recovered from a natural case of COVID than someone who has been given a good vaccine. We know that the vaccines give a more uniform protective response than recovery from natural infection. Recovery from natural infection, you get all over the map. Some people can be reinfected very easily. The people who get most sick from natural infection, when they recover, they're protected pretty well. But you don't want to be on your deathbed from this virus.
Right, and with reference to this specific mutation, as in general, to refresh the minds of all those who are watching and reading, why would you say, or what would gives you the confidence that any of these vaccines, including the ones that we're taking in India, that's Covaxin and Covishield, are a sure shot, solution to ensuring that at least people don't, the fatalities are low and people only suffer, let's say, mildly?
Well, I don't want to make promises about specific vaccines because I don't know the brand names. I'm not familiar with the brand names that things are labeled with in India. Okay, the AstraZeneca vaccine should be very, very effective at protecting people from becoming dangerously ill. I have heard even that China has come out and said that their inactivated vaccine, now they do have a bunch of different vaccine candidates in China. I'm sure some of them are good, but their inactivated vaccine, they've been disappointed in their own results and they've come out and said that. So I don't want to make claims about an inactivated vaccine, but any of the adenovirus vectored vaccines or the mRNA vaccines are going to protect you fantastically well on an individual basis from any risk of becoming seriously ill. Now, I'm not going to say that's absolute. There's always going to be exceptions that prove the rule, but on an individual basis, if you get the AstraZeneca vaccine, for instance, you have an excellent protection against a risk of becoming seriously ill.
Right. So in some ways, therefore, you're also in a way confident about the evolution of the virus itself and how far it could go or how dangerous it could ever become.
Yeah, so there's a really important paper that came out by Sarah Kobe and some co-authors from the University of Chicago. Her last name is spelled C-O-B-E-Y. And the title of the paper is something along the lines of why virus evolution should not drive vaccine hesitancy. And she and her co-authors showed with very beautiful mathematical models rooted in excellent evolutionary genetics and medicine that these vaccines are very, very likely to protect us. And it's so important that we don't lose sight of the fact that just because these viruses are mutating and evolving a little bit, which is exactly what we expect them to do, that should not make people think that the vaccines aren't going to work or they should delay getting a vaccine. Exactly the opposite. You should get a vaccine as quickly as possible because that's going to push the virus into a smaller evolutionary space where it doesn't have room to innovate anymore. The more the virus can run free, the more it can start almost like a little entrepreneur, start new business plans or experiment with how to get past neutralizing antibodies. But any of those things, the vaccines are fantastically effective and our immune systems are elegant and amazing. They have multiple layers. And the vaccines basically give your immune system the key to unlock all of these abilities that your immune system has to control a virus. And so we don't want to lose sight of that. Just because the virus can infect someone a little bit and get past their neutralizing antibodies doesn't mean the vaccines are failing. Infection is not the same thing as disease. And a failure of a vaccine is not easy to achieve. It's not easy to happen.
Right. Now, on the B1617 variant, which we are currently dealing with or largely dealing with, now, would you say that this is the most fearsome or dangerous version of the virus that you've seen, or have there been other mutations in the last 6 months to a year? And I mean, in general, I mean, how is the evolution and what is the path that it is demonstrating at this point?
What we're seeing most of all is recurrent emergence, so independent emergence among a lot of different, like when the virus spilled into us from, let's say, a bat or some other animal species, it creates its own family tree, and you're seeing the same types of mutations occurring on lots of different branches of that virus family tree. I do not think that B.617 is likely to prove the most scary variant yet. And it's probably a midweight puncher. It's probably a reasonably interesting variant from a scientific perspective. But as far as for the general public, it's COVID-19. Don't freak out, calm down, get the vaccine, and yeah, realize this virus can infect you, and realize this virus is always going to be changing little by little. But it cannot completely change. It cannot completely change everything about itself and outsmart all of our vaccines and immune system. It's basically the same virus from December 2019 in Wuhan, China, maybe with a fake mustache on and some sunglasses and a wig, but it cannot outsmart your immune system. Your immune system is fantastic. So have faith in your body's ability to fight viruses, especially if you've had training from a vaccine.
Right, and this particular mutation has obviously now taken hold of India, and yet we've also seeing the number of vaccinations rise. Now, is there a point where, because we are not vaccinating fast enough or enough people, that the virus mutation may speed up, or it may mutate faster and differently?
Well, the virus's mutation rate is fixed. But when you deal with large populations of humans who are people that are spreading the virus, it's the number of infection events that is driving evolution. The virus is constant in its rate of changing its genome, and this is just because it isn't perfectly faithful at copying its genome when it replicates. And again, a lot of those mutations are harmless or even harmful to the virus. It's just every once in a while the virus, so to speak, wins the lottery and finds a mutation that makes it a little bit more infectious for a human cell. And particularly when it infects an immunocompromised person, when it's in an immunocompromised person and it can infect for longer, then it starts to come up with variants like B.117. And variants like that, where you see a lot of mutations appearing suddenly at once, because it's really had time to adapt to the human body, that it doesn't get that comfortable space to get acquainted in a normal infection. But in immunocompromised, it's different. So that's more what drives it.
Right. Last question, Dr. Kamil. So, one of the points that you had made in my earlier interview with you was about the GSA database, the database of all mutations globally, which allows researchers like you to understand, get a better sense, and come up with responses. Are you happy with the data sharing, particularly including from countries like India? Are you getting enough that you need to make your own analysis?
I would say that India has improved its sharing on GSA, and I think that all countries need, and all researchers and locations around the world need to realize that when you sequence a virus, like a flu virus or SARS-CoV-2, and you make that data available by participating in the GSAID program, you are retaining your power as an author, because GSAID literally enforces that people must cite you by name and recognize your work. And this is very, very important. And there is something of a controversy in the scientific field right now, because there are idealistic people who think that data should just magically appear on their computer and they can do whatever they want with it, and just relegate the authors to a database code in a supplemental file. And that's unacceptable for real-time sharing of data. If you want scientists and public health workers to go and gather these samples, decode them and sequence them and share them in real time, it needs to be incentivized and fair. And I would go one layer further. I would say, if you look at marginalized communities, the poor, the hungry, they need to know that we're not just coming in there and taking something from them and using their bodies as an incubator to study viral evolution and write cool scientific papers. This data is valuable. It can save lives, it can develop new medicines and vaccines, and people can profit and make real money off of it when it's shared in real time. So the world needs to have a conversation with itself in the open about how do you incentivize data sharing, and how do you empower the poor, the marginalized, and everyone to know that what they are sharing is valuable, not just authors, but also people, because we all need to be submitting samples regularly so we can have a live view of all these threats.
Right,
That will
right.
protect us
Dr.
all.
Jeremy Kamil, it was a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining me, and do hope to catch up with you again.
Thank you, Govind. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.